Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf on Sunday is Daf Chav Vav Amud Aleph, and we're continuing to learn from my father's Shabbat Afur Shalema, David Nachman ben Yechevet Shifra. The Mishnah Daf Chav Vav Amud Aleph. So we are continuing with still talking about the Machlekes also of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Meir as to what is essentially the most important part of the get. The Torah says the Kosel you should write. According to Rabbi Meir, the Kosel law is referring to the signatures, the witnesses writing, and the preamble to it, or the actual text of the get is not, doesn't have to be lishma. And Rabbi Elazar, who says that no, the Kosel law is referring to the actual get, and the get is activated by Eidim Mesira. Eidim Mesira is there only for Tikkun Olam in case you need some evidence in the future. And the actual writing of the get, there is two parts. There's the standard template known as the papers, and then there's the specifics that only relate to this particular star, which is called the Torah, the revealed part of the star. It contains the names, the place, and also the Zman, the time. We already explained earlier why the time is essential. We had an argument of Yechon Shlakish. Are we concerned that maybe you're trying to protect, you're going to backdate whatever, protect your niece if she committed adultery and she was warned by Adim, so you could say, backdate and say, or still say it happened previously. According to the Shlakish, the husband might continue to sell the properties, the Nixim Maloig, the dowry that she brings in, which she has no right to, and therefore you have to have a man on it. So, says the Mishnah, we'll have a few opinions here. Opinion number one, this is the Tanakama, and we're not sure whether this is Rabbi Elazar or who this is. If you write the standard template of Gittin, you need to leave a few gaps. The name of the person, the Makamish of the wife, or Makamazman, the date. You need to leave all these spaces blank. You need these names because of the Shema, and you need the Zman because you have to have the right time, right date. Study Milvum, when it comes to contractual loans, also, you have to leave the space of the Malva Mokam Alev the borrower, because if you're going to start leaving over there, if you're going to start writing those names prior, next time I get to do the same thing. Mokam Hama is the place where the money took place, and Mokam Azman. You also need to leave a date. The date over here is obviously not because of Gittin. The date you need on its own merit, because otherwise you're going to take from the kuchas, you take from the purchasers, the wrong dates, and that's not fair. Because we have called that a Sman Star Muktim, it can be predated. Study Mekach when it comes to contracts of sales. Sodich Shiniach Mokam Halakech, the buyer Mokam Hamoich, leave that blank, Mokam Hamamani, Mokam Asad field, Mokam Man. Again, the date is very critical here, not because of the Xera of the get. For its own sake, you need to know the exact date. And then he says over here, this is because of Takana. Now, we're not sure exactly what is because of Takana. Is that a reason to ban something? Like you shouldn't, you shouldn't write the names because of takana, or is that, which could be if you learn like Rameh holds the writing doesn't have to be lishma. So why can't you just pre-write these names? It's because of takana. We don't want things to go awry. Or makam takana is the reason why I make allowance, because according to Rabbi Elazar, that you shouldn't write anything. Not even the standard template. Everything has to be, the name to be lishma. The standard template, you got to be careful. Otherwise, if you write that not lishma, maybe the rest you will. But because lakana, we decide, let's have templates lying around to make it easier. We'll see two ways of learning pshat. But if you learn like Rabbi Elazar, that means Rabbi Elazar eventually ultimately does allow you to write the typhus, the template, without knowing the names of the husband and wife. Then we have Rabbi Yehuda Paisa Bekul, Rabbi Yehuda Pasels, and all of them, even ordinary shtaris, and the big machlekes Rashi Taisus, what exactly he disqualifies. According to Rashi, he disqualifies everything, even he disqualifies even just the typhus of all contracts. He disqualifies because we do the typhus, you'll do the tariff. If you do that, you'll do the Gittin. Even those two steps removed, and according to Taisa, no. The only thing Rabbi Yehuda is disallowing is all shtaris to to write the names, but typhus you are permitted to write. Rabbi Elazar machshir b'kul. Rabbi Elazar now comes along is machshir by them all. Rabbi Elazar is machshir by them all. Chutz b'Gittin Hashim. What exactly is Rabbi Elazar machshir? So according to Rashi, Rabbi Elazar is only machshir the typhus. According to Rashi, Rabbi Elazar is only machshir the teifus, but in all other studies, the teif is still forbidden. And that's how Rashi the teifus learns. Rabbi Elazar is machshir in every respect, even the teif. He permits all other studies. He's not worried at all. Sorry, getting back to Rabbi Yehuda asks all studies, teifus, everything. I meant Rabbi Elazar is a machlekes Rashi in teifus when he says machshir bekulan. According to Rashi, there's only machshir other studies. The teifus, the standard template. According to teifus, is a machshir even the names. Chut be Gittin Daf. Gittin Daf is the only exception. Remember, it says the kosher lo lishma. Sounds like from here that Gittin Daf is exception. That not only is he forbidding the Torah, but even the teifus, the standard template is forbidden as well. Which means if we learn that the first part of the Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar, this Rabbi Elazar argues with the first part of the Mishnah, because there he said that the teifus you are permitted to write, and here he's saying you can't write anything. So the Gemara will explain there's two Tanaim according to Rabbi Elazar, but then the last part, because it says because of law lishma, is difficult to understand because the cost of law is talking about the name, not about the standard template. So the Gemara will talk about that as well, explaining that is the reason why you shouldn't write the teifus, because since the Torah is forbidden, so we are worried, concerned if we allow this, you'll make a mistake here as well. Says Yehuda said name of Shmuel, you also have to leave one other step. We talked about leaving gaps for the name specifics, but one other standard line which is vital, which is pivotal to the get. You have to also leave the space where it says you are permitted to everybody. That also has to be done lishma. That's the ikar part of the get. That has to be lived. Taisa already says, even though it sounds more, these are the only words to be used. There are other words that people use over time, but the sentiment is the same. And this follows Rabbi Elazar. The Amar Eidim Mesira Karsa. So Rabbi Yehuda understood that the first part of the Mishnah, the author is Rabbi Elazar, who permits the teifus by Gittin because of a special takana. Will be in but you have to write the Shema. That's why you have to leave all these specifics blank. Says the Gemara, every Mishnah we had till now, we have the exact same thing. And each time you declared it's Rabbi Elazar. So we had three different Mishnahs. Mishnah number one was, it says, and the Gemara will explain why we had to declare by each one. The first Mishnah talked about writing milchubah when it's still attached. So we said you're not allowed to write a get when it's still attached. And then the Mishnah says, but you are permitted to write. If you did, it's all right. So how do we explain that? So we explain it goes according to Rabbi Elazar that what you shouldn't write any part of the get when it's attached. But then we said, but in the end, if you wrote the teifus, while it's attached, it's good enough. As Mark continues further. So we need them all. The Yashmin Hakma is only the first case, which is what about Mechuber. By he who the equal only there we can learn like Rabbi Elazar. Biktani ain't case because the Mishnah has a contradiction, so we have no blame. The only way you can resolve that conflict is by saying it goes to Rabbi Elazar. It says first of all, ain't case you're not all right while it's still attached, and then it says that costs food. If they did right, it's all right. So you explain the difference between Torah and Teifus, and go Chatchili, you shouldn't write the Teifus attached, but yeah, it's all right. I will say for the Tani. The next where it says ain't case not get a the next Mishnah where it says that anybody can write a get a chayil shot of a cut. And then the Mishnah is a middle case about a wife writing a get. And then the last case is where then the Mishnah includes ain't kima get elabachayisma, but the only one that can fill the get. Other signatories sounds like the Eidich Simmer. That sounds like Rameir. And that explains it. That's why we don't care who writes the get. But Rameir, they had to spell it out. No, it's really Rabbi Elazar. Now, it's really Rabbi Elazar. How can you have a child? Talking about either we start off saying God will somebody supervising, and as Tais explains like the shliach, or we'll say because we're only talking about the teifus. They can write the template. When it says ain't kima get elabachayismav, that's talking about the middle case where the wife can write it and give it to the husband because it doesn't matter. The main thing is the aid and masir. So therefore, it's a chiddush. V'yashmin. That's tell you know that's Mishnah Rabbi Elazar. V'yashmin by here. He not make look Rabbi Elazar. Over here in this very Mishnah here, we have Rabbi Elazar coming in the end and telling us that it's kosher. Every single shtar is 100% kosher. Teifus and teifus, and therefore. I would have thought, the Sefer Rabbi Elazar have a Reisha, Rabbi Elazar. I would have thought that the Sefer Rabbi Elazar, the Reisha is not Rabbi Elazar. Clearly, Rabbi Elazar has an opinion in the Sefer where it clearly says you can write any shtar, that all other contracts are kosher, anything you write. And except Gittin Daf, which means that side of Tativ has to be done properly. And then the beginning Mishnah says that the Tativ has to be done properly, but Tativ is all right because it's the Kana. It's not Rabbi Elazar. Therefore, I would have thought, with the Sefer Rabbi Lazar, how about Eshel Rabbi Lazar? No, Eshel Rabbi Lazar, and Baruch explained, there's two Tanaim according to Rabbi Lazar. What do you mean Takana? There's two. What do you mean? What's because of Takana? Two ways of learning Pshat. But Rabbi Anderson, with Takana Sefer, this is Takana to support the Sefer, and goes according to Rabbi Lazar. He says, Eidim Mesir Kars. Since Eidim Kars, what it tells us, the Kosala means that I get has to be written properly. The names. So the Taifus also should be written properly because of Xera. If you don't write this properly, maybe the Taifus also written properly. Over did not feel David you should write. You're going to say from Shudder abundant, but they can't help out the Sefer. They just said, you know what, the Taifus you can write have standard templates all around in case you need to get ready. Your hands you have one ready. Rabbi Yehuda says that no, all contracts are forbidden, just like a get. And the reason is very simple. Gazar teifas are to tailor. He says, first of all, you cannot write the teifas because maybe if you write teifas, write the teifas. And Gazar started it, and then all other studies have exactly the same din. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, like I said before, according to Rabbi Yehuda, all other studies, not only can you write the teifas without being nor can you write the teifas as well. You have to wait until you're commissioned to do that. Why? Because of a zeta get. It's like one big zeta. It's not like a decree to a decree. It's one big zeta. But Rabbi Lazar machshe bekula, and Rabbi Lazar is machshe by all of them. What do you machshe by all of them? I said before. I think it's Rashi takes it. According to Rashi, to write the teifas by all stars, according to Rashi, even the teifas. Could be Gittin Daf, except Gittin Daf. Sounds like from here that Gittin Daf, not only can't you write the teifas, but even teifas as well. Teifas are to teifas. Why? Gaza. That he was geyser. So to go that far to say that all other contracts of Allah was not geyser. Then you concluded because of law. The reason why the teifas is forbidden because it says because of law. No one says that the word because of law, the teifas is referring to the teifas, the standard template. It's referring to the specifics. So what do you mean shenema? The hakik siv law atayim with the siv says about the teifas. The aim of shenema says because of law because the teifas tells you that you're not allowed to write the teifas. Therefore, we will go into the teifas as well. Says the Gemara, but I have a problem from the beginning of the mission to the end. Kasha, Rabbi Lazar. At the beginning of the mission, you say, according to Rabbi Lazar, what we learned before, that the takana was that we allowed them to write the teifas of Gittin, the standard template. And now you're telling me that he said you're not allowed to write the standard template. And so the Gemara today, Tanay, you leave Rabbi Lazar. Tanay, according to Rabbi Lazar. Abshapsai Omar Chizkid, we hadn't tasted before. When we talk about Goyish names, standard Gemara gives one example, Shapsai. He says you have to be careful between Shapsai and Shapsai. Shapsai is a Jewish name. Shapsai is not a Jewish name. So Shapsai, if he's right from there, Shapsai Amar Chizke, Shapsai says in the name of Chizke, Mishum Ketata. He said that what? That the reason why they allowed you to write the teifas is he's saying here that no, he's saying another pshat again. He's saying that our mission is actually a mayor, and therefore a mayor holds you don't have to write anything lishma. How come then you have to leave the gaps for the names? Because of a ktata. What do you mean for the ktata? So that kana is not a reason like we learned before, according to Rabbi Lezer, to enable you to write something. It's coming to explain why something is forbidden. And what is forbidden? Because of ktata. What do you mean ktata? If we are going to allow you to write anything else, if the husband and the wife have a fight, and he's angry, he's behaving irrationally, he'll go straight to the sefer and make a beeline to the sefer, take the get that he heard that's available, and just give it to us straight away. And we want him to pause, just like we learned before, we learned later on about Basa, and we learned another one by Koyanim. They have a temper, and therefore we made a special rule called get mekushas, something to delay the giving of the get so that he can calm down, especially by a kohen, because once they give a get, they can't change his mind. Same thing here also. We don't want her to go through the tortuous path of receiving a get, and tomorrow you calm down and say, oh, let's get married again. So therefore we say, let's take time, commission the sefer. By the time it's finished, maybe by then you reconsider. Says the Gemara, technically have to go tell it, we can write the sometimes we'll hear the sefer the Kasim is writing. With Savra, or in the case of here, he's saying that the wife, there's another reason, but I'll tell you next. If the wife hears that the sefer put names down and she knows it's her name, or she recognized her name and the husband's name, she'll think that the husband commissioned. That itself will drive a wedge between the two. The Savra, she'll think that he told her, that'll be. That's one version. That's his explanation. That in itself will drive, will create a wedge between the two. So therefore, don't have these things. So she shouldn't misconstrue that the husband commissioned the sefer. And Chizah said something similar, but he says as follows: What's the takana? Takana, we don't want her to be an aguna. Aguna sometimes means chained, and sometimes means that she's divorced, but she doesn't have a shidduch yet. So she's also like an aguna. I can follow either one. I can follow me, like you just said before, but a little bit different. It's like the variation of what you said. Meaning the 80. We don't care what you write. But you don't have to write any part you want. Sometimes they have this dispute. The rotach Allah, he will be angry with her. He will toss her a get. Just leave her there without any provisions. And that's very torturous. That's not fair. Therefore, we wanted to calm down and pause. That's why we say, don't write any names. Let him commission the Sefer to write the names, and maybe by then he'll reconsider. Amila, another way of learning is to go to Rabbi Lezer. And he's explaining, if you go to Rabbi Lezer, of course you have to write Lishma. But why the Taifas, we allow you to write the standard template, even though you not Lishma. Rabbi Lezer see the Karsa. That more than the Adim not to see the transfer. So you shouldn't write Taifas. Sometimes the husbands go overseas. And he can't find a safer available. He'll leave it out, giving her a get. But he'll leave it behind. But it should be a real aguna chain. And he gives it to her. Therefore, we make it easier as quickly as possible. Now it says you should always leave the date. But Tony makes a standard rule. We don't care whether they're actually married. If he gives a divorce after engagement, you also have to leave space for the date. And we have to understand why a date is pivotal when it comes to merely an engagement. From marriage, we learned before it if he's dying. Whether we're worried that he's going to, there's no date he's going to protect his niece from adultery, whether it's because that the husband will continue selling the properties even though he has no right to, and then she will try to claim it back and she'll never get it back. It makes sense. Eliminate is if they're really engaged when the husband has no right to sell any of her property. So what are we worried about? It's even worse because his punishment is skila rather than just chedek. Fine, he will protect her. Therefore, we want a date. Elamano should pay it because he might continue selling her dowry, and therefore she'll try to collect and she'll lose out. He has no right to sell the dowry. Pay Arusa be Isla pay the when he doesn't get a hold of the dowry then until they get married. I once heard this from Uladama. He made the following cryptic statement. I didn't know what he meant. He said the reason why we need a date is to protect the child. I didn't know what he's talking about. But once I heard this brayso where it says, I want you to write a get to my betrothed. That's not my wife yet, just engaged to her. That when after we get married, I will give her a get. When I'm married, I'll give a get. Ain't a get. In that case, it's not a get. Why not? He wrote a get. He wrote a get today, and he said, "We're not going to activate it until after we get married. Right away, I'll give her the get." The following day, or a couple of days later. Why isn't it a valid get? We are worried. If they have a get that's dated from the time they were engaged, and then they get married, everyone assumes that you get married. Probably not everyone assumes, but probably they had Bila, and then she falls pregnant. And then people don't remember any of these details. They just saw that she was divorced at a certain time and the child doesn't check out. They're going to right away assume or allege that this child was born out of wedlock, and it'll be a stigma for this child forevermore. Is hachinami, so too in our case. Zeta, why you have to have a date? Zeta, we are worried. Shema, you have to have a gate in case he goes through a similar exercise. And people will say that this, look at the date of the get, doesn't match with the child age of the child, must be born out of wedlock. And that kind of a get, therefore, is not valid. Rashi says it's called a get yoshan. We learned before about a get yoshan you shouldn't use. Tais already argued because a get yoshan, which means a get predated and afterwards they were together, caused all kinds of constellations. But Tais says a get yoshan, but if you use it, it's all right. So Tais goes further. That over here, because they got married, definitely they had relations, not just they were together. Halach is Halach is like Rabbi Lozer. What? But the end part of the Mishnah, which is the what, and not only that you have to leave a blank to the Torah, but even the standard template has to be written Lishma. Kori Rabbi led the Rabbi Lozer. Rabbi first made a comment about Rabbi Lozer to read the Chakima, the best of the Chachamim, the most praiseworthy of the Chachamim. He's a halacha like Rabbi Lezer also by all other contracts as well. This that he argued Rabbi Yehuda, and he said that all other contracts, at least the Taifus is permitted according to Rashi. According to Taifus, everything is permitted. All other contracts. How could it be? You have to be very careful. The Rava said that you be very careful that a star should not look false. Haya sharta the daina, this step of approval from Dayanim. The Michveh, if it was written, made the listeners let's say you had a contract for the bezin, they heard that the witnesses are coming in to testify, this is their signature, so they gave a stamp before that. It doesn't look, it looks false, it looks fraudulent because it was signed before they even heard the Eidim. It can no longer be used. Any stamp that looks false, so according to Rashi, according to Taisys, if you wrote the date for the name before even it was commissioned, of course it looks false. According to Rashi, even the standard template looks false. How can you use any star this way? Says about the lesson, the halacha is not like rubber, but fetish, you could write other studies prior to them being commissioned. The Taifus and the Kodrashi and the Taifus. How do I know that we're not so concerned about if it looks false? I thought it's correct. It's not only a question of appearances. But for Nachman, he said clearly by Gittin, you finally get lying there in the tip. Chasoma, you can sign it with Nas the law, and you gave it to a kosher, it's kosher. If you signed it, you gave it to a kosher, even though it was written for somebody else, it was just lying there training. But afilu Rabbanu and even the Rabbanu Agra Meir, Rabbi Lazar, only when it comes to Gittin, because they say the Eidim is there and it has to be written, the Kosel has to be written properly, meaning we don't have that requirement. Then it looks false, it was written before even this transaction took place. Doesn't matter if it looks false, as long as it's real. But I'll prove it to you. A star shall love a boy. Let's say Reuben lent money to Shimon, and then Shimon paid it back. And that same day, you took out another loan from Reuben. Can you use that contract again for the other loan? Even though it's all correct. But you cannot use it again for the next loan. Because the entire shibud already was gone. And once it's gone, you have to write a new star. Not because it looks false, because the shibud that was connected to the star, the lien that was connected to the star, the encumbrances was canceled. I'm not worried about the fact that it looks false. Even though it was written prior to this second loan, it still would have been, if it still would have been kosher, it was written on the, let's say it's done in the morning and the second loan, even though it looks false, but it's a real star, it would have been good enough had it not been for the fact that since you paid it out, there's no longer any encumbrances. Have a good day, everyone. We'll continue tomorrow.